Welcome, Irina, Faith, and Candace.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining Out of Home United's inaugural webinar. So I'm especially honored and really excited to be part of this initiative, as well as moderating this very important panel. I've been a huge proponent of female advancement in the workforce, supporting and empowering women, and really lending a voice in areas where a difference can be made. So today, we wanted to shed some light regarding this topic and really begin with sharing some stats with you that may potentially shock you. We know that Dawn and Mark did a great job in painting the picture with the McKinsey study. I'm going to peel the layers a little bit more in this intro. And really, it's really in hopes that we can create even bigger change to the advancements in the out-of-home and advertising industry that have already been made. So 85% of corporate executives and board members are white men, and only 7% of Fortune 500 CEOs are female. There's also a 5% pay gap between male and female executives. When we start looking at the out-of-home industry, women in the out-of-home industry only represent 36% as a whole, versus women in advertising, which equates to about 53%. So, just some glaring sort of differences here. Also, in a recent Morningstar report, it suggested a couple of things. Number one, women were less likely to be promoted than men. And number two, for every 100 men who are promoted to the position of manager, only 85 women were promoted. And the gap is even more pronounced for African-American women and Latinas. So women held 38% of entry-level management positions in 2020, but when you're looking on the male side, men held the remaining 62%. So today, you will hear from two female experts, and I'm very excited to be sharing this panel with, and they'll be sharing their views, changes that they've made within their organizations and teams, and that really affects the rise of female leadership and overall female inclusion. Our first panelist is Faith Garbolino, Chief Commercial Officer at JCDecaux North America. Hi, Faith. And her mom influenced her career early and encouraged her to work hard and establish her own financial independence. And so she took that advice and started her career 25 years ago, where her first job was with a cable network, and where her sales manager would not allow the reps back to the station without a contract in hand. So this really taught Faith how to quickly be resilient, help her channel that experience when starting at JCDecaux, which she started in local sales, and where she obviously exceeded her new business quotas, moved into national sales, then management into a VP position, and then worked her way up into the C-suite, now where she's overseeing the full street furniture billboard sales team. Next, we have Candace Simons, who's the founder, president, and CEO of Brooklyn Outdoor. And for the past 15 years, Candace has been disrupting the status quo and what a leader in the out-of-home industry looks like. So as the first woman to be awarded the OAAA Rising Star Award, breaking glass ceilings and barriers for the underrepresented is what really drives her forward. Candace leads a predominantly female-operated firm that is one of the only minority-owned businesses in the industry with a WBE designation, and provides coaching, mentorship to women stages in their careers, as well as sitting obviously on the leadership board of Out of Home United, and which obviously further advocates for change and inclusivity within the industry. So let's get started. Faith, let's start with you. So considering how underrepresented women continue to be in corporate America, can you give us a few examples of some of the things or influences you've set forward, or JCDecaux, in your current position? It'd be great to also sort of paint the picture in terms of your company distribution, women versus men, and what that timeline looks like. So past versus the present.
Sure. Thank you, Irina. And I'm honored to be alongside this panel with both yourself and Candace, and a big congrats and job well done to all of the panelists here today. I've been very fortunate over my sales career to have very strong mentors, both men and women. And as a result, I have tried my very best to pay it forward and recognize talent, certainly within JCDecaux, and especially as it relates to our female staff in various position levels. And I just wanted to share a few highlights of some stats within JCDecaux that I think would resonate very well, especially for the females joining the panel today. About 50% of all our senior managers are women. About 70% of our female managers have been promoted from entry level. About 77% of our female senior executives have been promoted from mid-level. And about 60% of our overall sales team are women. So sort of like, you know, big hands up for that. And just to share two quick examples that are relatable from my team, I have two women, both of which started as college graduates, sales support, moving into sales coordinators, local sales, national sales managers, and both are currently VPs within the sales organization. So I feel like they've sort of followed my track record, and I feel like I tried to establish that similar path for them and other employees that are looking for the same opportunity. Additionally, both are heads of business development, sales, and properties, and in HR, as we saw with Dawn earlier today. Ad operations, our legal team are all led by women and part of our C-suite and executive committee. So I think at JCDecaux, Irina, to some of the stats that you mentioned, we're certainly trying to do our part of empowering and seeing growth for women within our organization. We can always do better, but I think, you know, that's a very good start. And given this upward mobility within JCDecaux, we've encouraged and implemented expert-led training. So some of that included having group interactions with various department managers who have found it helpful to brainstorm with other departments and learn and lean on one another, helping overcome struggles and employee conflict together. And I think one of the biggest takeaways has been a very happy work environment, fostering a very good work-life balance, which ultimately encourages employees to work harder, be more effective. And recently, which Derek touched on at Lamar as well, these women have come together to implement a female leadership team, focusing on bridging the gender gap and diversity. We recently issued a female DEI survey within the company, and the feedback overall was pretty good. I think in the long run, giving our female employees a voice and a sense of empowerment will only encourage more longevity and growth overall.
Great. Yeah, and you know, with the support of our male counterparts, Candace, and how about you? Yeah, you know, considering how underrepresented women continue to be, you know, what are some of your influences, you know, corporately that you've done?
So although our company, Brooklyn Outdoor, is very female dominated, I think we're about 90%. So definitely above the 36% we got going on, but most aren't, as we're seeing. So showing the industry as a whole, it just started raining here really bad in Detroit, FYI, if you hear any thunder. But showing the industry a different organizational makeup and leadership style has always been something that I've taken great pride in. And it's taken a lot of time to cultivate and build. So this has been something that's been very important to me for a long time. And similar to what Faith said, and a lot of the things that Derek is doing and CC are doing, is I've actually built a proprietary coaching and leadership program for everyone on our team, specific to not only our organization and our unique needs, but also being conscious of what's going on in the world around us. From what we've seen in the past 2 years, things can change in the blink of an eye. So what once worked doesn't always continue to work. And this was one of the biggest drivers that actually propelled me to start Brooklyn Outdoor in the first place, is to do things differently and to set the stage for those that are following that. You know, I didn't have that positive role model in the industry that was in the C-suite, or a visible path that I could follow. Funny, anecdote is, I was once told by a previous boss that, Candace, you always march to the beat of your own drummer. And for them, this was meant to be really negative feedback. At the time, that was meant to be negative feedback to me. And I took it as negative feedback at the time, but this is something now that I carry with me as a strength and as a reminder that change is necessary to grow. And since joining the industry, the answer has always seemed to be, this is the way we've always done it. This is how we do things. So in marching to the beat of my own drummer, I just decided to drum in a different direction with different instruments. And I think that a different path always exists, and it's not too late to affect change. So this is what we're doing at Out of Home United, and it's on a larger scale. It's something that's never been done before. Multiple organizations, trade organizations coming together for one super important initiative. And this is going to change the face of our industry forever moving forward. So.
And this is why you're attracting, female talent and retaining this female talent. So well done. Candace, let's stay with you.
Sure.
Empathy in female leadership, it has a lot of upsides. Dawn touched on a couple of those, which includes collaboration, openness, innovation, a happier workplace, and obviously what we all want, a positive business outcome. So Candace, considering the majority within your company are female, nonetheless, how have you bridged the gender gap? If you can give us some specific examples, what you've implemented in the day-to-day at work, in your company statuses, in your conference, in your closed conference room with your teams.
Yeah. I would say for most of the past 3 years, I've spent my time and my heart creating a culture that's very unique to Brooklyn Outdoor, that starts with the people and the relationships, not only between us, but with our clients and our partners and so on and so forth. And due to this culture shift, we've been able to transform the way that we operate. Our collaboration has increased tremendously, even having completely remote team over the past few years, understanding each other as individuals and how to communicate with each other, and really working together as a team towards the same goals, making sure those goals are very clear and the action steps are very clear. Every organization is different, and you don't necessarily have to have a corporate budget. That's something that, was very interesting between Faith and I being at JC2Co and then, having a very small business like mine. But whether you have a budget or you don't, there's always ways to implement these types of initiatives and changes. You just have to be aware of what needs to happen and actually put motion to it. So Out of Home United is going to be a great place to look for that guidance if you need it. Another thing is, I've always operated personally on the motto of treating people the way that you want to be treated. And your values should be no different within your organization as they are, I think, in your personal life and lives. So the values within our organization were actually put together by our entire team. So everyone is invested in those values and lives those values on a daily basis through our meetings and through, the way that we communicate and the things that we do. So like modeling the behavior you want to see and creating a space where everyone feels welcome and heard, I think is a really good place to start. And in order to attract the right people, you need to be exact. You need to know who you are, identify your unique culture, and then fiercely stick to your core values and let those be your guide, regardless of if anyone is trying to tell you different. If those are your values and that's who you are, stick to that and just move forward with your body armor on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge supporter of what you're saying. I honestly believe that there shouldn't be a pecking order. You can get some really valuable insights from somebody who's a lot more junior than you are, just as you would if somebody who's a lot more senior as well. So, you know, but really making sure that you listen and give everybody a voice is absolutely an important value to create an effective culture in your company. Faith, do you think that unconscious bias, I know we touched on this a little bit throughout the other panels, but do you think that it's influencing, you know, decision making? And then, you know, when you're answering your question, can you touch on what your hiring process looks like, promotion and employment retention models at JCDecaux?
Sure. I think unconscious bias is really beginning to change, especially with this new generation of hires. You know, I think they're coming in very open-minded, which will only continue to spread as they grow within the organization. And I think also having the level of female leadership that we do currently have at JCDecaux has really fostered a more objective hiring process. I think, you know, women, as we touched on a little bit, sort of naturally have, you know, a little more empathy. And I think that that plays, you know, a big part. And I also think we have to really evaluate, you know, all candidates based on their school and their work history. We're using online tools that also helps take away any prejudice. It's very black and white, and it's sort of a definitive critique as to whether or not this individual is a good fit for the role. We also encourage employees to apply for internal positions, encouraging a little bit of crossover. And sometimes you find that those candidates have strengths within a different department that, you know, maybe they didn't realize was there before. And then, you know, both our co-CEOs and our HR department have encouraged all managers to really organize and conduct reviews at least twice a year. And I think during those reviews to try to understand from those employees what their path looks like, what they want in terms of upward mobility and how we can help get them there. And then I think also in terms of, you know, a few takeaways during the interview process, which I've learned along the way is, you know, to try to wait 30 minutes or so before passing judgment, because, you know, studies have shown that I think people do that within the first 5 minutes. Give it a little more time. Try not to pass those opinions on to other hiring managers within the team, let them make their own opinion. And then also, you know, don't conduct short interviews. I think the longer you spend with a candidate, the more you'll learn. And I think the more you might be surprised and have a better level of comfort that they're a good fit for the position you're hiring for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cast the net as wide as possible, you know, and see what brings, you know, what return you get. I love the fact that you guys are also looking, you know, within your organization and seeing, you know, where they could be a better fit, you know, versus just negating and firing. So I think it's a really great move that you guys are doing. So next question and final question goes to both Faith and Candace. Faith, let's start with you. So while education continues to play a really crucial role for women, and you've touched on some of the things that you're doing internally, there are still great candidates that are still being excluded, unfortunately, due to how women and men have historically been perceived and placed in these buckets. So, for example, more women in HR, client services, yet there are more men in IT, computing, tech, and data. So what can we do? And Faith, can you share 3 examples, please, of what you're doing internally at JCDecaux?
Sure. So I touched on a little bit in that previous question about our hiring process and trying to avoid, you know, any prejudices during that hiring process that would take away some of those stipulations, as you said, in terms of placing candidates in these buckets. You know, I think that we've also tried to bring in outside hires as well from different advertising industries or different industries overall that come with a brand new perspective. And I think bringing in new hires to the culture at all levels, again, from entry level to senior, helps distinguish between trying to find the right candidate. And again, some of those buckets, as you said earlier. Right now, within our ad operations team, as an example, it's, led by a female, and that department is just about 100% women, which is a very tech savvy department for us. And we're also working to do the same with our IT and operations department, which, as you said, tend to be a little more male dominated. But I think it's just a matter of casting the net, the outreach, referrals, and again, just continuing to stay open-minded.
Super. Candace, can you shoot over 3 action items? Like, what are your takeaways, in terms of continuing this effort?
Muted. Okay, sure. So a few of these are going to sort of come from our pillars established in Out of Home United and some of the things that Mark touched on earlier. But I think the first thing that needs to be done within any organization is establish a baseline within your organization. So we've established these baselines within our industry for all different types of diversity. And the first step is to take a look at yourselves, which is oftentimes the hardest part of this, is to recognize blind spots within yourself as well as your own organization. But it's vital to creating an inclusive environment. So sending out an anonymous survey around DEI is a great way to identify some of these blind spots. I can't remember who touched on that. I think it might have been Cece, but at Brooklyn Outdoor, it was Cece and Derek and at Brooklyn Outdoor, we actually have quarterly one-on-ones, and we send out anonymous surveys each month on different and important topics to gain that feedback and study the feedback to identify these blind spots so that we can propel internal change. So, one-on-ones are great, but sometimes you kind of need that anonymous feedback to get a little bit deeper on things that might be deeper rooted, like these really difficult subjects. Number 2, once you know where you are, then you can set a path forward. So using that employee feedback and your baseline, you can begin to create a culture that's distinct to your organization and that sets you apart from the rest and attracts the type of talent that you ultimately want to attract long-term. If you're modeling an open culture and open communication and, if you're modeling all these things, then, you're attracting what you put out into the world. Number 3, set goals around DEI the same way you set revenue goals, the same way you set any internal goals for the year. When you're starting your year out, set those goals this year, 3 years, 10 years, and then work backwards. So that's also something that we're doing in Out of Home United that you'll start to see come forth, is not everything can happen overnight. So it requires engagement, being dedicated the same way you are to your sales goals, because we all know we are, and taking those action steps that are ultimately going to affect change. And then you can be the change that you want to see in the world, in our world, in Out of Home, from the large scale down to your individual organization.
Wow, what a beautiful way to end this panel. Thank you for those wise words. And thank you both for your contributions today. I know that I'm very honored to share this panel and be part of this initiative. And for those of you listening, we really hope that you found the content valuable and are passionate about addressing the inequalities that still exist. So thank you. I'm going to pass this back on to Stephen.
Well, thank you, all of you. Thank you, Irina, Faith, and Candace. Great conversations, and certainly conversations we need to keep having. We do have a few questions, and at this point too, I'd like to ask anyone out there who does have any questions that they are still thinking about to please type them into the question bar right now, and we will ask them to our panelists, either these wonderful panelists or some of the earlier panelists we heard from. But the first question I have, and I'll throw this first maybe to you, Candace, this person says, as a woman in my role, how do I garner the attention deserved that would be given to a male in the same role?
Great question.
She wants to know how she can really get the attention that men sometimes get.
So in my experience, men in my same role are often just given respect. Your title, you have respect, you have that title. Women, on the other hand, really have to earn it. So I've personally garnered this attention by just daring to be different. I've been told the old ways don't work, as I mentioned earlier, and not to challenge it. Like I also mentioned earlier in my drummer scenario, like don't do social media, don't do PR, don't draw attention to yourself, dress a certain way, whatever it might be. And I was actually like shamed for it for years, and really picked apart for looking at things through a different lens and with a different vision in mind for my company. But that's sort of an old mentality, and that kind of thinking is something that really doesn't produce change. So what are people doing now as the world has changed? Social media, PR, studying analytics, understanding customers' new needs, where they're looking, and really starting to take risks and all of the above. So I'm not afraid to be bold, to take those risks and do something different. So that's what gets noticed, and it's not for everyone, but that's what, in my experience, what's gotten me here. And sitting here today speaking to, everyone. And now in Out of Home, we're speaking to this power of sort of pairing social media, public relations, out of home together. So now it's about not being afraid to blaze a new trail and to do something different and extend our reach outward even further as an industry.
Candace, you certainly have marched to a different beat, but you've made beautiful music along the way.
Thank you, Stephen.
Hey, Faith.
It's not always beautiful music, but thank you.
It's an acquired taste sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Faith, what do you think?
To be honest, I don't think we really need to do anything all that different, right? I think part of female empowerment is being yourself, right? And being exactly who you are. And I think if we work hard, show up with a good attitude every day, with that same ambition that any male would have and a smile ready to go, that to me, that in itself garners its own attention, right? So I think, I don't think we need to do anything special. I think, we walk the walk and stand just as tall as they do, without really having to try to stand out.
Absolutely. Irina, I bet you have some thoughts on this too.
I do. We do hear these questions a lot. And, what I think is really important is to develop clear goals, which sets the tone and the pathway to that role. So I think it's important to include specific, a specific timeline with those goals. And all of this must be done with your direct report and of course with HR's visibility, right? Because you want to know that you're also being looked at and considered for that same role. So put yourself in there, right? And like Candace said, find your voice, find your drummer, and then it becomes a no-brainer. But really get the support from your direct report and from your team, and I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, what can men do in their organizations to empower women at every level? Irina, what do you think?
I my suggestion to men would be to look at your Zoom screen or at your meeting room. And if there aren't women sitting at the table, then there's clearly a huge issue. You know, we have touched on many important data points today, and it should be a knee-jerk reaction to include women for any and all collaborative work, in my opinion. We know that women shed empathy, perspectives, and valuable inputs that always lead to success, right? Again, a no-brainer. So I think it should just, the visibility should be there. Look at who's there and who's supporting you, and make the right judgment call, right? And make sure that you have more female leadership who are part of the conversation.
Do the right thing, right? Do the right thing. Faith, how about you? What do you think men can do better?
I echo what Irina said. I think at JCDecaux, I've worked there for 20 plus years now, and I feel very fortunate to work, alongside many male colleagues that have daughters, some that are young, some that are currently in the workplace, and I've seen them, stand behind their daughters and the females on their team and help encourage them to use their voice, look, for promotions, look for ways to get involved within the leadership team, try to collaborate and mentor our, younger female hires. And I think when we all come together that way and we can relate, to each other's personal life as well as professional life, I think it sets a positive tone for female empowerment.
Absolutely. And Candice?
I think it's not necessarily what men can do better. I think it's really about allowing for that empowerment, because there are so many wonderful and amazing men in this industry who are extremely supportive and who surround themselves with women at all different levels. But to better empower women, I would say, at any level in their organization, men can start by asking questions and really listening. I think people would be surprised at the amount of feedback and change that can be implemented by just being in each other's listening and developing personal relationships and understanding the challenges of being a woman in the workplace, period, not even just in the C-suite or in an executive level, because there's so many other things that are going on and juggling sort of behind the scenes. So being aware of that while also, respecting it at the same time and being supportive of the personal lives. I think it's also a really good practice not to put people into certain boxes based on their gender. So Faith was talking about this earlier, but there's a lot of tools out there that you can utilize and questions that you can ask to make sure your people are in the right position based on how their innate wiring is as a human being and their abilities. So it also is helpful for hiring and, understanding if you're hiring someone for the right criteria of that role, regardless of gender, you're kind of getting that sort of out of the way, and, allowing for, different genders to be in different roles and have different responsibilities within the organizations.
Mm-hmm. Right. Last question for each of you. So if there was one thing you'd like the audience to remember today, to take back with them and remember, what would that one thing be? Irina, what do you want them to remember from today's conversation?
One thing, Stephen, that's tough. But I think, and I do see this often, and my teams would hear me say this a lot, cast the net as wide as possible, take your glasses off, don't see what's really there, just really listen, be committed, care, listen to your teams and employees, and really prove that you're listening, right? And I always say that there really isn't a pecking order, and there shouldn't be one. You'd be surprised how many insightful things that you can take away from the most random place, right? Who can bring so much value to you individually and as an organization. So that's where I stand.
Good. Faith?
I would say, you know, this whole idea of imposter syndrome, right? Especially for women. My advice would be just to own it. Believe in yourself, believe that you have every right to be there, that your contribution, your voice, your intellect, and everything that you're contributing to your daily job, to your team, is extremely important and valuable.
And Candace?
I really love what Cece said in, you know, look at your bubble, look at who's around you in your world. And also, you know, I've mentioned Out of Home United, I think 6 times throughout this, but it's something that is just so necessary moving forward. And I think if you're not familiar already now with what it is, get familiar. This is not going anywhere. This is a very long-term organization and project. And yeah, it's going to be here to stay. And, you know, we really encourage you to get involved in any capacity that you can. And if you have any wisdom to provide to us and our team, like, we are all ears and would absolutely love to hear any of that feedback, so that we can add that into the mix as we move forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Irina, Faith, and Candace. And we truly hope you've all enjoyed today's seminar and that our panelists have given all of you good ideas for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in your own organizations. Please do visit Out of Home United online and learn more about our initiatives and the future plans we have with the organization. And we do encourage you, as Candace does, to please get involved. On behalf of OAAA, Geopath, and DSF, I would like to thank you for joining us and ask you to please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.